I'm Vic DiCara. Welcome to the second episode of my Authentic Astrology show. In this episode, we're going to be discussing a few very important fundamental techniques that ancient Vedic astrology uses to decode the information in an astrological chart. And we're going to do so using the chart of Sri Krishna as our example. So at the same time we'll be learning about astrology, we'll also be getting introduced to some very interesting philosophical and theological concepts. There's quite a bit of debate about what Krishna's chart actually is. For this show, we will just use the most widely accepted chart as described by great authorities, Surdas and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. In Krishna's chart, the moon occupies Taurus's lunar mansion of Rohini, and this mansion and sign was rising in the east as well when he was born. Also in the first house of Taurus is the southern eclipse point, Ketu, which means that the northern eclipse point, Rahu, was across the sky in the seventh house, Scorpio. The owner of Taurus, Venus, was the extremely bright evening star in her own house, Libra, the sixth house, in the company of exalted Saturn. Mercury was also at his brightest as an evening star in the fifth house, created by his own sign of exaltation, Virgo. So Krishna had the planet of intelligence, bright and exalted in the house of intelligence. The sun, planet of the soul, was in the deepest internal part of the sky, the fourth house, in his own royal sign, Leo. Jupiter, the planet of expansion and blessings, was in the 11th house, the house of felicity and gains, which was built by his own emotionally deep sign, Pisces. And Mars, the planet of passion and energy, was in the 9th house, the house of religion and morality, exalted in Capricorn. So what we're dealing with is a chart of Sri Krishna, who's at the very least a very great historical personality, and at the most is purported to be an incarnation of Godhead. So we should treat it with a bit of respect. And as a result, we can have a look at what Krishna himself is said to have said about the reason for his birth. In Bhagavad Gita, it's been recorded that he said, Paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya chaduskritam, dharma samsthapanartaya sampalami yuge yuge. The reason why God incarnates in this world is to help human society become a more prosperous place. And he does so in two ways. First of all, by benefiting and befriending those who are good and helpful in the society, and second of all, by opposing and overthrowing those who are bad or harmful in society. So let's take a look at Krishna's chart and see how these principles are reflected there. Stereotypically, Jupiter is the good guy and Saturn the bad guy. Accepting this for what it is, we will find the good guy in Krishna's house of friends and the bad guy in his house of enemies. This reflects the fact that the purpose of his birth is supposed to be befriending and benefiting the good people while making enemies with and opposing the bad. But let's be a little less simplistic and stereotypical and take a closer look at that sixth house in Krishna's chart. It's a very important house in this chart because it's the home of the Lagnesh. Krishna's sixth house holds the union of Venus and Saturn. This union is so important in this case because it forms a Raja Yoga. So I might wind up spending a whole episode explaining what yogas are, Raj yogas, and why they're so important in Vedic astrology. But for the purpose of this show, let me just briefly explain that yoga means a union or a combination, and it refers to the different alignments that the planets can make. And Raja means king, so a Raj yoga refers to the king of all possible alignments. This alignment has the potential to turn people into kings as well, because it bestows a great synergy between their inner desires and their external opportunities. Now, Raj Yogas are not entirely uncommon. They're relatively common, but it's not common to get a very powerful Raj Yoga. You see, Raj Yogas are not all equal. When a Raj Yoga involves very weak or negative planets, that Raj Yoga is not very powerful. But when Raj Yoga involves very powerful and positive planets, then that Raj Yoga is tremendous. So, in Krishna's chart, we'll get an example of an extremely powerful Raj Yoga. So let's take a look at that chart. So immediately you can see that both of the planets involved in this yoga feel very positive because they're in Libra. Libra is Venus's own sign, and Saturn is exalted here. So this alone shows you that the yoga is extremely powerful. But ancient Vedic astrology drills far deeper than this surface assessment by splitting each zodiac sign into a group of 10 facets called the Dash Varga. Each facet has a certain number of divisions, and each division represents the harmonic resonance of a specific zodiac sign. The result is that Vedic astrology identifies different astrological conditions on a degree by degree or even smaller basis within a single sign. Each planet will be affected by a total of 9 zodiac sign facets, in addition to the main sign you see on the surface of the main chart. The more a planet is in facets that are positive for it, the more positive its mood will be, and the better results it will bestow in a horoscope. And the opposite is also true. Krishna was born with Venus and Saturn each in highly exalted facets of Libra, which makes the effects of his Raj Yoga extremely powerful and actually satisfies a very interesting astrological rule regarding incarnations of Godhead. Parashar Muni, the grandfather of Vedic astrology, has written in his Horashastra, in the 41st chapter, that an incarnation of Godhead, or Vishnu Tattva, would have an astrological telltale trademark. And that would be that this person would have a Raj Yoga in which the planets forming the Raj Yoga would both be in positive facets of their sign in 7 out of the 10 possible cases. Venus is in her own sign Libra in 6 out of the 8 facets that you can see. This illustration doesn't depict 2 smaller facets, but at this location she is in Libra in the 60th fractional facet for a total of 7 positive facets. Now, regarding Saturn, we find him in a position in Libra which grants him 7 positive facets without even referring to the 2 that we can't see depicted here. So now you know one of the most important and accurate tools of Vedic interpretation, how to use the 10 facets of a sign to determine how positive or negative a planet will be in a given degree within that sign. And you know how this principle has acted in Krishna's chart to elevate his Raj Yoga from an ordinary status to an extremely exalted, even godlike strength. So let me also mention just briefly that a principle in an astrological chart will become stronger the more times you see it repeat itself from various points of view or various lagnas. Now, in Krishna's chart, his Raj Yoga repeats not just from the point of view of the ascendant, but also from the point of view of the moon, and also from the point of view of the ruler of the ascendant and the ruler of the moon. So you could say that this already godlike Raj Yoga in Krishna's chart has just become magnified 4 times. Another thing is that the Raj Yoga will express itself in the context of the house in which it exists. And Krishna's Raj Yoga exists in the 6th house, the house of enemies and obstacles. So this shows that Sri Krishna has a fantastically powerful 6th house, which would indicate a person completely impervious to enemies and obstacles. In fact, this is exactly how mythology or history portrays Krishna. He's said to have been killing assassins from the age of 1 week old. And as a teenager, he defeated a king with his bare hands in a public wrestling match. An extremely powerful 6th house. In fact, Krishna's 6th house is not just strong, it's the house of a Raj Yoga of Vishnu Tattva. So it shows him to be an incarnation of God whose mission in this world is to free human society from its true enemies and uplift it to a more peaceful and harmonious state. That's about all we can fit into this episode, but I'm going to continue this topic into the next 2 episodes. The next episode will be The Secret Life of God, where we'll discuss the mind, body, and soul in a chart and how it applies to Krishna's chart. And then in the episode following that, we'll do relationship astrology, using Krishna and his consort Radharani as the examples for that. That'll be awesome. So please go to my website, www.vicdicara.com, or subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can keep up with our show. Thanks for watching.